Hello, this is Andrew Thake, Divisional Director at Resourcing Tomorrow. Delighted to be joined today by David Awram, who's a co-founder and executive director of Sandstorm Gold Royalties. Delighted to have you with us today, David.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me here.
David, Sandstorm have been in the news recently with regards to Royal Gold. Can you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, certainly. What we announced this week was a friendly takeover by Royal of Sandstorm Gold, but also of Horizon Copper, another company that we had worked with and created a number of years ago. We're delighted, I think, by the announcement of this. It's, I think, a real nice blend of two different assets. We're really the smallest of the royalty, mid-cap royalty companies. They're the smallest of the senior cap. But when you bring the two assets together, you create something that's really special, has extraordinary diversification and a huge amount of resource life. So well positioned to compete with really any of the royalty and streaming companies that exist in the world today.
Um, Turning our attention to this year's Resourcing Tomorrow, where you'll be along with the rest of the team. You'll be revisiting one of the best presentations we've seen at Resourcing Tomorrow the last 21 years. Where did all the equity go? Can you tell us what was the thesis of that original presentation back in 2017?
Yeah, I think this is a theme that's been really important, but largely overlooked in our space. What we have seen in a tremendous shift in now what's probably about the last 15 years is the shift away from specialist resource funds into either ETFs, into private equity, and even into companies like royalty companies like Sandstorm Gold. So what has happened, the ultimate result is that we've lost a huge amount of specialist investors. Generalist institutional investors, instead of going into these specialist funds, are moving into ETFs and into other companies that are not deploying equity like we have in the past. And that is having tremendous negative effects on our industry's ability to discover and develop these important assets, regardless of commodity that you're looking at, that are going to be important drivers for how this entire industry grows over time.
And of course, since that 2017 presentation over the last 8 years, um, it's got even sort of like more acute in terms of even more passive ETFs in terms of the marketplace. What other trends have you noticed in the mining equity landscape?
Yeah, I think that's really kind of a key part of it. We have seen more and more streaming and royalty deals, which I think is really great in terms of being able to support it because royalty and streaming companies have that type of capital that matches up extraordinarily well with mines. The other trend, though, is the exact opposite. When we look at equity public capital markets, there is a real divergence. They've gotten more minute and minute in terms of attention and time span and tolerability of time span. Long-term investors now sometimes think that's a quarter, 2 quarters, like at most really kind of a year. That's what a lot of equity investors look like. And that's because the public capital markets are looking at effectively minute by minute data to determine where they're going to look at. Whereas the mining industry is focused on more long-term capital. They can't make decisions. Can't make decisions on developing mines or assets on minute by minute or quarter by quarter data. You have to really take a viewpoint on really how this commodity is going to perform, how this mine can perform, and you have to try to find capital and investors that are going to match up with that. And that disparity between equity public capital markets has gotten even further than it has 8 years ago when that presentation was first done.
In Nolan Watson's 2017 presentation, he also stressed the importance of technology in some of the changes, a declining brokers, for example. With the rise of AI, how should the mining industry embrace AI and what should they be wary of?
Yeah, I think we're starting to emerge and seeing a lot of the aspects that machine learning AI is helping out with. Where I think there's been a particularly impactful aspect of it has been on the processing side. Processing, mineral processing, metallurgical side, there's a tremendous amount of great data to be able to use that. And as a result, we've seen a great impact. We're starting to see a good impact on the exploration side. There's a lot of groups that are out there looking at this. And as we go through and understand how to make it work, we're getting better and better results on this. Now, it's a little bit tricky because there's, as opposed to processing where there's a lot of standardized data, exploration, it tends to be a little bit more noisy, a little bit more scattered. But it seems like there's more and more groups that are getting that. Hopefully that's going to help a lot. I think where it will help a lot on the AI, on exploration, is more brownfields, areas where they have a good understanding of really how that data fits in and a lot of data points. That's going to help out a lot. But absolutely, it's going to become an important component of everything from the mining, the processing, and eventually it'll do a good job in terms of really providing solid results on the exploration and the geology side.
You've mentioned how royalty and streaming companies like Sandstorm and Royal Gold can help fill the gap. But what other changes, maybe it's market structure, maybe it's regulation, would you like to see happen to address the problem?
Yeah, I think what's happening now is you're starting to see jurisdictions that are taking it seriously and participating. You know, groups like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia who are taking a stand and understanding and cooperating with these, with the mining companies, with the sector to encourage this. Again, that's great type of technology, type of capital to come into the space, because they're thinking more about the outcome. How can they build their economies? How can they drive? How can they transform what's happening in their countries, and making sure that they have supply of those vital critical minerals that are going to help keep their economy stable in the future. So that's been a recent trend, and we're starting to see that even in places like Canada. We're starting to see that in places like Australia, where they're really taking, the governments is starting to take in a real proper proactive stance in how to develop these vitally important resources and mining opportunities that exist in their countries.
David, thank you very much for your time today. We really look forward to meeting you, Sandstorm, and the Royal Gold team at Resourcing tomorrow this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks. And I can't wait to be there at the conference.